G'day, my name's Glenn. In my last video, I was trying to decide between Sony cameras and Lumix cameras. I was looking at the image quality, trying to make some decisions on the lenses I'd recently picked up, which were some Blazer Remus lenses. As I was looking back and forward between, Sony and Lumix, I was thinking, this is a great opportunity to actually share some knowledge with some new filmmakers or people getting into the industry, trying to find what the right camera is for them. Now, before I go all into that, I'll share what I actually chose, and for me, it was Lumix. I started off by getting the trusty old S1H. These things honestly used to be like $5,000 when they first came out, or a bit higher than that, Australian dollars. And I got this one for, I think it was around the $1,600 or $2,000 mark, but I've seen a bunch of these $1,600 online, which is a huge drop from what they were at, 5,000 plus Australian. I've also picked up two S5 IIXs. I've got this one that I've built out. I might jump into that rig one day and explain a bit more about it if anyone's interested. But yeah, I've got two S5 IIX cameras, and for me right now, these cameras basically cover all needs that I have. I shoot events, I shoot some narrative work, some music videos, and a little bit of content creation, but I just bounce back and forward with my jobs quite often. So these cameras made the most sense to me. Now, instead of just throwing a random brand name at you and being like, hey, Canon, Nikon, Sony, whatever, I want you guys to just have the right questions to ask yourself. That's probably the best advice anyone can give. So I've got my kind of list over here of things I'm going to delve into. I've been writing a few things up. The video I tried to do on this probably about a month ago or half a month ago, it was all over the shop. So I've basically narrowed this down to categories of questions you want to ask yourselves when looking for a camera. Now, the first thing we all have to ask ourselves when we go into buying a camera is price. I want you to have that as like a bracket over the top and think to yourself, all right, all my other categories come under price. Now, I guess a little story to help with this. I've had many people in the past reaching out to me on Marketplace or Gumtree. I might have a camera up there for like $2,500 I've sold in the past. And they're like, oh, hey, can you do this for $800? Like, it's all I've got. And I'm like, hey man, like, that's great you're getting into filmmaking, but I'm not gonna drop more than half my price to give you this camera. People get this thing in their head of, I need this, I need that, I need this latest thing. I'm gonna encourage you guys, kind of like when I got this S1H first, to really delve back into Lumix, look at yesteryear's best models. You're gonna save yourself so much money, and you don't need the latest and greatest. Autofocus is great, don't get me wrong, but if you learn all the skills of like manual focusing along the way, when having to get used to some of that older equipment, that's going to help you become a better filmmaker. So under that overarching bracket, I guess you could say, of price, the first column I want you guys to think about is, within the money I have, what camera gives me the best usability? Now, what I mean by usability is kind of like video tools. I want you to think into things as well, like how long my battery is going to last. Essentially, is this giving me tools to help me expose properly? If you've only got zebras and histogram for a video maker, I don't think that's enough. And if you're relying on an external monitor to get those things, sure, it might get you by for a little while, but can you trust the video tools built in that monitor to serve your camera properly? In other words, those video tools in that monitor might not be written right to match with your camera. They might be giving you different exposure measurements based on what the monitor thinks compared to what your camera needs. Now, speaking on that exactly, that's the main reason I actually went away from Sony. First of all, price. For what you get in Sony cameras, the price is up there quite a bit. And secondly, the usability or the video tools they give you is very lacking. You only have histogram from memory, zebras, and you can do a bit of a workaround with false color and use some LUTs to give you a false color, but it's not an easy way to do things, especially when you're on an event or even shooting a wedding. You have to be fast paced, run and gun. You don't have time to play with LUTs and putting it up onto your monitor and finding ways to switch to it. It's a thing that holds you back and stops you getting shots. So a big thing for me that I really chase in cameras is I love to have shutter angle. If I'm changing frame rates, I like to have shutter angle so it naturally switches what your shutter speed would be. Other things, false color, I find is probably the best tool for exposing. You've also got waveforms. Now, Lumix doesn't have false colors, but they do have waveforms, and that really helps you see whereabouts your highlights are sitting. And even things if you start shooting with anamorphic lenses. Have you got anamorphic D-squeeze in the camera? Now I know with the Sonys, like the FX30, the FX3, and I think the FX6, they're getting a lot of these features put in. They recently got shutter angle. They are getting, I believe, some different anamorphic D-squeezes put into them. Plus they are actually getting Blackmagic RAW out a bit later this year, I believe in September. So Sony's getting there, but upon the release of the FX2, which came out just before, basically filming this video maybe a few weeks before, they're still not offering tools that I think are usable for me. Things that I need with my price bracket, like really false color waveform, a big thing on exposing, so the image you get is actually good and you know it's going to be on the day. You're not second guessing and, you know, having to view the dailies like they did in, you know, back when they were using film, hoping that they've got it right. With waveform and false color, you can sit and feel way more rest assured, hey, it's exposed, I'm happy that I've captured this right. Because when I was shooting on Sony, many times I get back, rubbing my hands like, oh, these shots are going to be sick. I have a look at it on the computer and I'm going, oh man, that looks terrible. And even after a solid grade, it still doesn't look right. The colors are fiddly anyway with the Sony. And then if your exposure's a bit off too, it becomes a whole hassle. So yeah, it was a lot of these niggly things with Sony that annoyed me. And seeing with this recent camera release they've made, I just thought to myself, they're still not moving forward. They're still having these really high prices if you want things like, you know, waveforms, and possibly some of the higher end cameras do false color. I'm not 100% sure with Sony, but currently FX30, FX3, even the FX6, they're not offering things that are amazing tools within that overarching price bracket. Now, moving on to the second panel or column, I guess, I've written brand pathway. You're like, what does that mean, brand pathway? Essentially, if you start off with a lower end camera, for example, if you start off with an FX30, we'll stick on Sony to help with this analogy, you've got to look at where you can go with that. Now, Sonys are actually really good for a brand pathway. What I mean with where you can go with it is the same E-mount goes up through their cameras, through the higher tiers like the FX9. I believe even the Burano has a Sony E-mount. Even the Venice, you can opt for an E-mount. And the lenses you might buy for your FX30, you can carry all the way through that line. So you're not having to chop and change and get different lenses and adapters and all this stuff. You can carry them with you as your filmmaking continues if you decide to upgrade your cameras more and more. So that is something to think about when you buy into a brand. Currently with Lumix, with the L-mount Lumix bodies, there's not too far you can go. They've released the S1 II recently. It's a nice looking camera, but it's not giving me much more features for how I shoot. I think it's offering some different codecs internally, like ProRes RAW, but I can't actually use that editing in DaVinci Resolve, so it doesn't make sense for me. Right now, I'm happy with the current cameras I have, and I'm hoping that Lumix does, I guess, introduce some cinema cameras in future with an L-mount. There are some other cameras from Blackmagic which are L-mount, but you can't quite move through the line with Lumix. For a better reference, I might actually talk about Olympus as an example. Now, they definitely have their own niche of things they're amazing at. They're really light cameras, good for travel and moving around. But when it comes to moving upwards for filmmaking, you're kind of stuck with that Micro Four Thirds mount. You can adapt things to Micro Four Thirds, but if you look at the current Olympus line, or OM systems, they call themselves now, there's not really anywhere you can go. They don't have any cinema cameras that you can move to. So that's something to think about as well. If I'm investing all my money into lenses and all this equipment that goes with my particular brand, can I take that stuff with me as I go through? And we're going to have to keep selling that, possibly, or very likely, at a loss to get other gear later. Okay, moving on to the third column under the overarching price bracket. The next column you want to think about, or question you want to ask, is what do I need to start shooting? Now, you might have your camera body, you might have your lenses, then you've got to start thinking about memory cards. Have I got enough batteries? A big reason of me choosing to opt for Lumix instead of Sony is actually the memory cards. With the current Sony cameras, and possibly into the future depending on what cards they choose to use, most of the cinema cameras are using CF Express Type A. I encourage you to have a Google right now and look at the prices of those. The price per gigabyte is way up there compared to other cameras and the cards that they use. In the newer Lumix cameras like the S1 II and the S1R2, they're using a CF Express Type B. Per gigabyte, those cards are a lot cheaper and yeah, just way more affordable. If you want everything out of your camera, it's best getting the best possible card you can for that system. Now, I shot with some SD cards on the Sonys that I were testing out, and at a time I did have a CF Express Type A, but I had to get that to get the whole, I guess, list of features out of the camera. If I wanted to shoot in higher codecs or codecs that gave me more information, I needed those cards. If I wanted to shoot in slow motion, I had to get CF Express Type A. There's just so many drawbacks when it comes to certain cards you need for certain cameras. So yeah, a big reason I didn't choose Sony. Their cards are so expensive, and at the point you'd buy, say, 2 CF Express Type A cards with enough space to shoot a wedding, I feel like you're nearly looking like the same price of the camera you've bought just to have something to record it to. It doesn't make sense. Whereas with these Panasonic Lumix cameras, this old S1H, it uses the old SD cards, 2 slots, and it records fine to V60 cards. With the S5IIX cameras, I have been using V60s on some events, but I am looking at using V90s and paying a bit more. Just a few little quirks here and there that I had. Things where I'd have to wait a moment for the camera to basically write to the cards that I had in the camera, and it may have made me miss a shot because I'd pressed record thinking I'm great, I'm recording, moving around with the gimbal, and I've gone halfway through, why is it not recording? I'm sure I pressed it, it's because it was still writing. So that's again why it's a good reason to opt for the best, I guess the best card for that system you can, and then look into how much are those cards if I opt for the best card to put into the system. Now, before I go on more of a tangent about all this, I'm just going to keep it simple because I could go on for a while, let's be honest. I want you guys to keep it simple, think about these questions. First of all, price, think about that bracket. Under this, with your first column, usability and video tools. What can I get within the price I do have? Second, brand pathway. If I invest into this particular system, can I take the things I'm investing in, all these accessories and lenses and cards and batteries, can I use these same things if I buy the higher end models in this same brand? And thirdly, what do I need to start shooting? Ask yourself that question. How much are the cards going to be? How much are the batteries going to be? Do I need a cage? Do I need to rig this thing out to make it shoot well without all these micro jitters going on? Keep asking yourself these questions within your price bracket. To really set these things in your mind, I'm going to actually share a bit of a story about how I've invested wrong in cameras before. There's been a number of times as I've figured out all the pathways of what I need for me, but the worst purchase, or I'll say most expensive purchase I've made in a camera before, has been a Canon C70. Now, don't get me wrong, that's an amazing camera. If you have the budget and the money to afford one of those, or a number of them, they're great cameras, they offer so much. And at the time I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is great. It's got dual SD card slots, redundancy, you can record to both at the same time. It's got false color, it has internal NDs, it's got internal RAW. I'm like, man, this ticks every box. No worries, this is awesome. And about maybe 2 weeks into buying that camera, it was about $7,000 to $7,500 Australian. I'm sitting there and thinking, I'm feeling like I'm not being a very good steward of my money here. I've invested a lot of money into this when I could have probably bought 3 cameras from Lumix for the same price, if not cheaper. Even secondhand, I could have looked at so many other routes, and because I shoot events and a lot of my stuff is kind of all-rounder, I'm stuck with this really beautiful camera, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't suiting my needs, and after a short time I had sold it on and I'd invested in other cameras. But yeah, just really think to yourself, what do I need? Think about those columns and those questions I've shared with you with that overarching, price bracket. Think to yourself, is this camera or this system worth spending my money on? Go through all these questions first before you invest your money wrong. And yeah, I hope these things have helped you guys out. Again, I see people, advertising all these different cameras or reviewing them, and they're saying, this is the new master, or they're saying this, that, and the other thing. And it's easy to get caught up in gear acquisition syndrome, also known as gas to filmmakers. Bit of a pun there, bit of a joke, you don't want gas. But it's so easy to get caught up in all these latest and greatest features. I encourage you again, look at yesteryear's best gear and or even like 5 years in the past, there was some really good gear out there, and it's really, really cheap now. Like you look at the Blackmagics, they've got like the Ursa Mini Pros, the G1, the first generation of those. I've seen them Australian dollars, like $1,500 or cheaper. Don't get caught up in all the camera reviews. It's so easy. I've fallen for it before. I've definitely had gear acquisition syndrome. You want to look at what's going to serve your needs the best. Do you need this extra AI autofocus, or can you wait? Can you just manual focus on this event? Maybe you should just get one good autofocus camera and your other two can be tripod cameras that are just set to manual focus. There's always workarounds that you can do. And sometimes, yes, there are features you need, like good exposure tools. As I said earlier, that's a big thing for me. But you don't need the latest and greatest to become a good filmmaker. I think a lot of the times I've actually grown as a filmmaker is when I've been dealing with gear that is hard to work with. I've had to adapt and get used to it. I've had to find tricks of doing things like setting my gimbal to one point of focus, and as I run around a band as they're playing and rocking out, I've got to keep exactly that, say, 3 to 5 meter distance from them as I run around them with the gimbal because I don't have autofocus. There's tricks you can do to figure it out, especially as a one-man band. If you don't have a focus puller, you're going to learn a lot of tricks along the way with that autofocus. I know I'm throwing a lot of information out there, guys. I'll try not to muddy it up anymore and kind of wrap it up here, but I encourage you, come back to these questions, write them down, write those columns: price, usability, video tools, brand pathway, and what do I need to start shooting? Ask yourself that as you're researching, and don't just jump out and buy the latest and greatest thing. See what you can do with the price you have and see what tools you need before you go spending your money in the wrong place. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you in the next one. Cheers.